And I think all of us are familiar with Cyndi. She's been with us a number of times, and we're looking forward to her talk today on visioning. Um, in addition to being a lifelong New Thought student and teacher, she's a facilitator and speaker frequently in New Thought meetings. She's runs a spirited life coaching business focused on the needs of lifestyles of women and facilitates the Bliss Camp transformational retreats, for which she is giving one in Lawrence, Kansas on March 14th through 17th. And hopefully, if she can stay through the coffee talk, she can talk more about that if you're interested. So without further ado, Cyndi's going to vision us this morning.
Good morning, everybody. Apologize right up front that I've got a little bit of a head cold today, so if I have to cough or get a drink of water, I will mute myself. But I feel fine, so I am very happy to be here with you this morning. We're not at the very beginning of the year, but when we start looking at January, I think the kickoff of any new year kind of fosters a lot of energy and enthusiasm around just new beginnings and leaving behind whatever distractions or disappointments we have from the previous year. Um, so it always begs the question, right? To resolve or not to resolve. How many of you did New Year's resolutions this year? It's like at some point we're like kind of over it. But however, so like I'm not a big fan of New Year's resolutions for sure, but I mean mostly that sounds like work, and quite frankly, I don't need anything else to add to my to-do list. But I do believe though that there's something about like a fresh new year that really gets us thinking about, and setting some intentions, like how could we somehow make our life just a little tiny, teeny bit better than it was last year, a little tiny bit less stress, or a smidgen more joy than the 2023 version of ourselves, right? So that, my friends, honestly is the key. Because it's not likely that it's going to be the big quantum goals that you set every year, which coincidentally are probably the same ones that we set every year over and over and over again. Um, that's going to create like the new improved you, if you will, in 2024. And by the way, I don't in any way mean to discourage your big, hairy, audacious goals. Like I'm all about that. Um, but it isn't, I mean, it is entirely possible to look like Christy Brinkley by swimsuit season. I mean, people do it, right? It's possible to clean 38 years of clutter out of your garage on Saturday. I mean, it's possible. But my belief is that if I were emotionally and physically ready to make that leap, I would kind of already be on that path, right? And so might I suggest that you just kind of allow yourself to find renewal in just setting positive intentions, like and really taking action on basically one small change at a time, because that's what's going to initially make the quantum changes. Because I know it feels like semantics, but to me, a resolution requires massive conviction and usually a pretty good sized dose of deprivation. And so that's hardly inspiring to anybody. And quite frankly, the main reason that most resolutions start to fizzle out by late January. So this year, instead of making a list of things to do, I'd like you to join me in just kind of writing a description of what you'd like your life to be, and start to tell a new story about who you are and what's possible for you, and then take action towards that vision. And I'm going to give you some tips on how to do that specifically, some tangible things that you're going to be able to do. And I have people ask me all the time if vision boards actually work. So Evan and I were just talking about this. And I tell them the answer is yes and no. So a big proponent of vision boards um, is that because it's not the board itself that's actually doing anything, I mean, the board is just a tool, you have to pick it up and use it. And what I also learned, and this kind of just came to me as an aha in the last year or so, I was working with a client and we were doing kind of a guided visualization. And after about a minute or so into it, she's like, Cyndi, I don't really see pictures in my mind. I'm like, really? Like, I'm such a visual person. And about 70%-ish or so of the population is visual, but then I like all of my adult learning principles started flooding back to me, and it's like, oh my gosh, yes, a good percentage of the population is visual, but not everybody is. Some people are auditory, some people are kinesthetic, right? Some people are a or a combination of different learning styles, and so that's why sometimes a vision board will not work for you. Now, you all are very versed in affirmations, right? And so the same kind of thing. Does an affirmation work? Well, yes and no. An affirmation only works if you have some element of belief around it, right? So you can regurgitate words all day long, but if you're offering a contradictory emotion, then it's going to have the actual opposite effect. So, because your mind basically is, you're teaching your mind that your actions can't be trusted because you're like saying a bunch of stuff that you don't really believe, which is why I've started using with my clients what I call a ladder of believability. I'll give you an example. So I'm on the board for the Women's Employment Network, and we get a lot of women in there who, well, I mean, their whole purpose for being there is to get a job, right? A lot of homeless women or women coming out of battered shelters and being laid off from jobs, etc. And so I always ask them when I go in there, like, why are you here? And obviously they're there to get a job. Well, one of the women that was there was homeless. She was literally living in a shelter. And so her obvious goal for that particular session was to find a home. So we're cutting out pictures and doing the thing on the vision board. And she cuts out this photo to put on her board of maybe a $5 million house. Now, once again, I'm not anyone to squelch your big, hairy, audacious goals. If she wants to live in that house one day, she will, right? But I asked her, I said, do you believe that it's possible to make the leap from where you are to this house in the next 3 to 6 months? And she goes, oh, no. This is just like my long-term goal. Well, we don't want to put long-term goals on a vision board because, I mean, you can keep them in front of you, stick them on a poster or put them on your, screensaver or whatever. But you're not going to be able, like, you're not going to take the steps. You're not going to embody the version of you that has that house in the next 3 to 6 months, right? And so it's important to be able to say, okay, and we've talked about like Jack Canfield. I'm a huge fan of his. And he talks about in The Secret how you have the headlights in your car, right? You can drive from San Diego to New York in pitch black darkness because you only need to see the next 50 feet, right? So your headlights show you 50 feet, drive. Now you can see the next 50 feet. So that's kind of what the ladder of believability is about, is try to figure out what is it that you can get your head around. It can be a stretch for you. Like this homeless woman didn't know how she was going to get home, but she believed it was possible for her to have a home. So that's the first step of believability, not to move immediately to the $5 million house. You have to be able to have some level of believability around it. I think you have to be at a 10 for believability and a 10 for desire in order for you to get what you want. Another example, I had a friend named Janet, and Janet works for Weight Watchers, and she's lost the same 70 pounds probably 6 or 7 times since I've known her. And the reason for that, and I don't mean to diss on Weight Watchers because I know they've done a lot of good in the world, but the concept of Weight Watchers is that you're a fat person who lost weight. So because she teaches there, she's constantly saying, well, I'm this fat person and I lost this weight. So if you're a fat person who lost weight, what are you? It's impossible for you to, instead of being, okay, I'm a fit, healthy person now, I embody this reality, like for myself. And so a big thing that I see on social media, or maybe you've done a white stone or whatever, where people are asking you, what's your word for 2024? Has anybody seen that on social media? Everybody's asking the question. And I can tell you what my word is for today, and maybe even for the next few weeks. But what I would say is that I have come to recognize that I plan to evolve past a singular word in the next 12 months of my life. So I might set a word at the beginning of the year that's accomplish, but then I might find that, there's a need for me to shift along about March into maybe rest, right? So like, what is my goal for this now? And so to set a goal, and this is where people get in trouble with vision boards and affirmations and setting their word for the year or whatever. It's like, I was like, I've got all year to accomplish that. So I'm not going to jump right on that task, right? But what I really have come to recognize too, it's not that I don't set goals, because I do set goals. I mean, you have to at least set some intentions, right? Or I'd be rudderless going through life. But I have come to understand that just setting a goal and building activity around that goal does not a manifestation make. I've learned that there's a few really important guidelines for how to create a vision and actually get there. And that's really what I want to share with you this morning. The first one, number one, the first thing you have to do is you have to get really clear about what it is you want and how you want that to feel. The only reason we do anything, the reason we buy anything, the reason we go anywhere, even the jobs that we take, right? The only reasons that we do anything is because we think it's going to provide us with a particular feeling. We're going to feel something. We're either going to feel happy. I wore my happy sweatshirt for you today. Or safe, or maybe accomplished, or strong, whatever, right? So it's especially important for women in particular to set a really clear intention. In other words, what's your big why? Because the female brain doesn't compartmentalize like men's, right? A man's has a separate box in their head for everything, right? There's a box for the car, and a box for the house, and a box for their spouse, and a box for their mother-in-law, whatever. So everything has a box. And so men are really good at being able to say, okay, when I'm going to talk about something, they take out whatever that box is. They talk about what's in that box. Once they're done with the box, they put it back, and then they pull out another box. Women's brains don't operate that way. For women, everything's attached to everything, right? And so that's why a lot of times, like for you gentlemen, if you're having an argument with a woman and she'll bring up something and you're thinking, we're not even talking about that right now. Whereas a woman's kind of going, hey, it's all related, okay? That's the whole Venus and Mars thing. We're not going to solve that today. But it is important to be able to narrow down, like, what is the why behind it? Because we're not motivated by the what. That's a very masculine process. Because there's not enough emotion around it. But this is important, and this is what I want you to hear for men or women, right? And I took, Patrick, I took Melanie Dean's online class, right? Which I highly recommend, by the way. And one of the things she said is that one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they're trying to manifest is getting too magical in our thinking. And what she means by that is just having a ritual around the manifestation itself, or it doesn't activate what she calls the scientific energy that's at work. Because emotion is matter. So that's the science behind it, right? You can measure it, right? Emotions are what activates the actual molecules, like the oxytocin and the adrenaline and all the good stuff that rearranges the energy in the way that you need it rearranged. So I'm not so well versed in the science. You'll need to call Melanie about that. But I have seen it in action. Edwene Gaines, who's a popular wealth guru that I followed for a really long time. She says that we treat Amazon better than we treat God. And what she means by that is you wouldn't ever call Amazon and say, just send me whatever you think I'd like. So you have to have some element of clarity around what it is that you want. So how specific do you need to get? The answer to that is that depends. And here's what it depends on. I have learned over the course of the last year that some people are very specific manifestors and others are what we call non-specific manifestors. Now, what does that mean? And I actually have a little test that you can take that I'm going to put in the chat here right now. Well, actually, I'll just show it to you. I'll put it in the chat also. There's a template for that. So let me see if it'll let me share my screen. Why, yes, it will. Okay, so here's what I'm going to have you look at. Let me move this out of the way a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to send this to you in the chat, and you can download it if you want to. And then I can also, I don't know if you want to, Dennis later put it in whoever's putting it in the after notes. But anyway, there's a checklist that you can go through that I've created that helps you determine if you're specific or non-specific. Like, for example, specific's going to be, I love the practice of doing the visualization every day. I think it's really fun. A non-specific person is like, I really can't get into that. That seems like a waste of my time. A specific person, I know exactly what I want. I know what color it is. I know the details around it. I know what date I want it to happen on. Whereas a non-specific is like, I'm really clear about what I want, but I'm pretty flexible about what the final outcome. So as you can start to look through the specific list, it's things that are being really inspired by the working the process of manifestation, scripting the day, using my vision boards, doing all the things, right? A non-specific manifester is more of a set it and forget it kind of a manifestation style. It's like I'm open to whenever it shows up. I know it'll be the right and perfect timing. So as you look at these, you'll start to get a feeling for which one of these you might fall into. Now, it's not to say that you couldn't be a little bit of both, but most people will lean more towards one or the other. So I'm going to stop the share, but I'm going to, at the end of this, remind me and I will put it in the chat for you so you can have that. But did I stop my share? Yeah, I did. Okay. So let me close this too so that I can actually put it in there. All right. So the biggest difference is really how you practice the manifestation. So I'm a specific manifester. I love the process. I find great joy in the visualization and making the boards and cutting and pasting. And I want to get really granular in the detail. I know what color I want. I know what date I want it to happen on. A non-specific manifester is clear about what they want, but they don't enjoy and or value the process of staying active in it. But both types are really active in the knowing and believing that it's possible. They're both a 10 at desire and a 10 at believability. Okay. So secondly, here's number 2. You have to see it and feel it as if it is already yours. Now we hear that all the time, but here's the importance of that. Because another challenge of setting a goal, if you will, is that by definition means that you don't have it. You see the dichotomy there? So you can see that this immediately sets into motion a feeling of lack. I've set this goal because this is a desire that I have that I don't have right now. So faith actually requires us to think exactly the opposite of how we have been taught to think over time. So that's why it's simple, but it's not easy. Setting a goal in the traditional sense, it's like keeping a carrot dangling in front of you all of the time. It's kind of mean, right? So that's why we keep making the same resolutions over and over again. Now, the obvious question then is, how in the heck do you feel like you already have something that you can't see in your 3D reality? So my suggestion is going to be that you plan your day based on the belief that it's on its way. So can you believe that? Okay, it's on its way. If you knew that you were moving into your dream house in the next 2 to 3 months, what would you be doing differently than you're doing right now? Maybe you're purging or packing up some of the stuff you don't use on the daily. You'd be researching the internet for drapes or picking paint swatches or starting to do repairs on your current house so you can get it ready to sell. Do you see where we're going with this? You don't have to see the manifestation, but if you, in fact, you believe it's coming, then you are going to embody a different version of you. You're going to start doing things towards like you are the person who is moving into your dream house, even though you may not have actually found it yet. And I'm going to see if I'm going to try not to butcher this story, but I was listening to something by Bob Proctor the other day, and it was so powerful. He was working with a couple who, like, their ultimate goal, they just got married, and their ultimate goal was to buy a house, right? And so he goes, well, are you looking for houses? Have you made the decision to buy a house? And it's like, no, we're not looking at houses because we don't have the money yet. And he was like, you don't have to have any money to decide to buy a house. You have to have the money when you're ready to buy the house, but you can decide to buy a house long before you ever have the money for it. But he said the reason you're not getting the money for it is because you really haven't made the decision to buy a house. Does that make sense? I was like, oh, that was like a cosmic 2x4 across my face. I was like, oh my gosh, like you can decide on something. And once you decide on that something and you act as if it is happening, like it has already happened and it's already yours, that is what sets into motion that the tangible evidence that you're going to begin to see. And you're sending a message to the universe that you are ready. Hey, I'm packing. I'm picking paint swatches. So, and if you wait until you have tangible evidence right now, you could be waiting a very long time, which is because of my third point, number three, which is number three, you have to clear any conflicts, limiting beliefs, or fears you have about having it. And so sometimes we can go, well, why would I have a fear about having it? It's about normalizing it, right? So I was watching a documentary on Gaia a few weeks ago, and this doctor was talking about how like he's has a hard time, he said, healing people because people don't know who they are without that illness. It's like, I've been sick for so long, I don't have an identity outside of it. This is all I talk about, it's all I do. I spend so much time in doctors' offices. And so anytime anybody talks to me, they ask me how I'm doing, and I have to talk about it all over again. So it's like he said, people get so, I don't want to say attached, but their identity is tied to that illness. And so he said, we have to remove that first before we can actually get people past the chronic illness. So conflict can show up in a number of really subtle ways. For example, I had a client a while back who was looking for a relationship. So she hired me because she was a solid businesswoman, right? She's very successful, but she hadn't made time or space or the energy for a relationship. And now she decided, okay, now it's time. I'm ready for a man in my life, right? So we started working on some, setting some clarity around that. And one day we were supposed to meet for coffee. And she called me and she said, for some reason my battery's dead. I'm like, no problem, I'll just come and get you. Right? It was raining, so she opened her garage door to come out through the garage. And when she opened the garage door, this woman has a 3-car garage. She's parked right smack in the middle of the garage, and there's crap piled on both sides of the car. And I was like, that's interesting. Like, where's this partner gonna park in this relationship? And so I asked her, I said, this is a strange request, but can I just look at your closet for a minute? She's like, okay. So I looked in her closet, and you can imagine what I found there, right? So there was like not room for another t-shirt in that closet. So I'm like, oh, for heaven's sakes, it's like you've basically created this blockade that doesn't allow any space for another person to be in your life. For heaven's sakes, clean out a drawer so they have a place to put their toothbrush and a comb. It's like we say we want something, but we haven't created an environment that it can thrive in. So this is really important to be able to take a look at that as it relates to contradictions. So it's really easy to confuse your subconscious with interference. And it's like I did this recently actually to myself, and I didn't realize I was doing it. So I've been running my business by myself since 2008, kind of doing my own thing, and I love the work that I do. And somebody who works for Garmin, I've done a lot of work for Garmin in the past, somebody called me and said, oh my God, there's this director position open, and it is exactly this job was made for you. It's like you have every qualification. And I'm looking through it, and I wasn't looking for a job. But I was like, oh, that is kind of intriguing, great benefits, really good pay. And I was like, I never thought about it, but maybe I do want to look at that. So I applied for the job, got an interview, got a second interview, got a third interview. And then like I didn't hear from anybody again for like 2 months. And I really let this stress me out. Like I created this identity around myself, like what's wrong with me sort of thing, which I don't even know where that came from. But then I realized at some point I got up and I was like, you know what? I'm basically creating interference for myself with this job. It's like I've confused my subconscious because it's just like, wait, I thought you were building this other thing. Like, I don't really understand what's happening. And so I realized that I just got distracted by my own fear. And that's just your ego trying to protect you, is all it is. Your primitive brain has something in it called the RAS. Are you familiar with the RAS? I know Patrick is because he lives with Melanie. The reticular activating system. And in your reticular activating system, it exists in the primary, the primitive part of your brain. And its primary job for the RAS is to filter all of the massive amounts of information that you take in every day and only registers what you think about the most, right? Which is why we think we're stuck somewhere, but we're not stuck. We're just repeating the same thoughts over and over again. So we're just recreating. But here's the rub. 80% of the time, we're thinking about what we don't want, and we can't figure out why we keep getting it. Your mind is an unbelievably powerful creating machine. And this creating machine When you focus your attention on where you want to go, it takes you there versus where you're afraid you'll go, which is where we normally go. And that's where worry and anxiety and things like that come into place. But we've talked about this before. When you're worrying, you're like, it's like planning a future event. So you might as well just bank on it. So let's talk about limiting beliefs for just a minute. I've asked you before, are your beliefs true? Which is kind of a trick question, right? So they're true to you. The problem is most of your core underlying beliefs about anything, about yourself, about how the world operates, they were all instilled in us between the ages of like 4 and 12 years old. And we just brought them into adulthood and we never stopped and challenged them for validity. So the best way to craft this in my own head is to say, for example, you go into a third grade class during a presidential election and you ask them who they're voting for president. Well, who's a third grader voting for president, right? It's whoever their parents are voting for. It's the only information we have. But a study was done during the last presidential election, 350,000 people, and they determined that 72% of the American population still votes the same party as their parents. Now, I'm not saying that's good or bad, but that's like a really staggering statistic. So your limiting belief, it may be about you, it may be about the state of the world, it may be about the economy or about your health or about what happens when we age. If you think you're stupid, you can't just say, oh no, I'm smart, right? Because if you think you're too old, you can't tell yourself that you're not and believe it because there's no tangible evidence. So the easiest way to combat a limiting belief of any kind is to seek out real evidence that's counter to that, which is really easy to do. An example I give is when I remember when my daughter's dad and I split up, she was about 3 years old. And I woke up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, like sheer panic, because it always happens at 3 a.m., right? And I remember thinking to myself, what if I can't do this? Like, what if I can't raise her by myself? What if I get sick? What if she doesn't like me? What if I can't support her? Totally irrational, right? I'm catastrophizing. And I had to remember my resilience training where I had to stop and say, okay, this isn't rational right now. It may feel very real, but like, what's some real evidence? I couldn't say, oh no, you're a good mom, because I couldn't convince myself of that at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'd have to say, okay, what evidence do I have that everything's going to be okay? Well, let's see. I mean, my mom had all 4 of her kids by the time she was 22. It was like, if she can do it, I can do it at my age, right? I've never been unemployed. If I am, I'm employable. My whole family is here. There's nothing to indicate that I'm not going to be a good parent. But I really had to like search for real evidence to say, wait a minute, that's not true. We've talked a lot over time about the confirmation bias, right? Where we seek out evidence to believe, to basically reinforce what we already believe. And so now your job is to seek out evidence to the contrary. Now, number 4, this goes back to collecting evidence that your goal is already in motion. Now, how do we know that? So if you are, say, wanting a particular kind of a car, and now all of a sudden you're out on the street and you see someone driving by in the car. So the important thing here is that don't be jealous that they have one and you don't have one. See this as evidence that this car is now beginning to show up in your hemisphere, which means it's moving closer to you. When someone accomplishes something that you really want, let's say a weight loss or a dream job or a cabin on the lake or whatever, this is a reminder that if it's possible for them, it's possible for you. And if your desire is a really, really big one, it might take some time for all of the pieces and the people to be in place in order to make it happen. So that's why it's really important that we stop and we celebrate the little teeny tiny small wins along the way that remind us that the wheels are in motion. So pay attention to synchronicities. Seeing your desire out in the wild somewhere. Noticing things that all of a sudden start popping up on your social media that remind you that this is a path that you're on. Because all those things mean that you're on the right frequency. So baby steps. right? And so what we see happen over and over again too is that like this happened to my daughter when she was looking for a job. She's going to be managing a farm for the first time up in Maine, and she had in her mind the farm she wanted to work for, and there were so many obstacles stepping in her way. And finally she's like, well, and there was an opportunity. She had to make some money, right, during the winter, because she's like, well, whether or not I take this job, I still need to make some money over the winter. And so an opportunity came up and wasn't really what she wanted to do, and she vacillated for a while. And finally she's like, well, I need to make some money while I'm here, so I'm just going to take this job. So she took the job. Her second day on the job, someone who knew somebody who owned a farm in northern Maine was looking for a manager, and they never had a manager before. Mariah met the person who introduced her to the person she was going to go to work for at a job she didn't want. So I want us to understand that a lot of times those baby steps don't look like what we think they're supposed to look like, right? My friend Paula called me the other day. She was in town from Colorado last weekend, and she was talking about how she didn't like her job, but she felt like she was pretty good at it, yada yada. And so she sends me a note. She goes, well, it looks like I'm going to have more time to look for a job because I just got laid off when I got back. And I was like, that's great news. She said, I love you so much, because no one else has said that to me. It's like two things can't occupy the same space at the same time, which takes us to number 5, which is similar to number 3, but not exactly. And this is it's not just to seek out evidence, but you're going to act as if, right? So it's not just about believing that it's already there. It's about embodying the version of you who is living this life. And this is the really fun part for me. So if you're a specific manifester, you're going to love this. I love putting the cart before the horse and acting as if this version of me already has the life that I want. Now, don't get me wrong, I have a good life, but I've learned this practice is really valuable for me. And I continue to build on it based on whatever my latest desires are, which, by the way, you'll never quit desiring. You are on this earth for expansion. So it doesn't mean that you're just materialistic. A lot of times the desires you have might be for just more time or more love in your life, or to laugh more often than you laugh right now. Desires aren't always about having a thing. But you're always going to desire, and it's not because you don't have contentment in your heart. It's because you are an expansive entity having a human experience. So you're always going to desire more, and that's supposed to be that way. So this really came to life for me back when I was working with a client a few years ago. Her name was Rima. She actually is a work colleague as well. We were kind of bartering. I was coaching her, and she was doing some website stuff for me. And one of the things I ask people to do, obviously, is to, as part of the coaching experience, a lot of the times is to say, okay, if I run into a year from now and I haven't seen you, I want you to write down everything that is happening in your life as if it is, exactly the way you want it to be. So she did this, and all of my clients from that point will be like, okay, let's figure out which one of these we want to play with first. But Rima started like manifesting all of them, one right after the other. Her daughter got accepted in this wonderful acting school, and they sold their house, and she's, moved to Vegas, and she's having great sex with her husband, and all of her friends are showing up, and all these wonderful things are happening. I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And so I asked her one time, I said, okay, walk me through a day in the life of Rima Benario, because I want to know, what are you doing differently? And she said, Cyndi, there's really only one thing that I'm doing. Every morning when I wake up, I look at this story that you had me write of my life a year from now, and every decision I make from the place of that version of that woman. And I ask the question, what would this woman do? What would this woman do today? What would this woman put on her schedule today based on the life that she said that she wanted? So the easiest way to combat a limiting belief is truly with real evidence. Action is the fastest way to build new neural pathways in your brain. So even if you're afraid, when you act on something, remember, this is where you engage your RAS, right? And it quits filtering out all the things that used to scare you. Learning to embody the version of you who already lives this experience that you want actually normalizes it. And that's why I suggest, like, when you do a vision board, add something to your vision board that you've already manifested. Now, I know that sounds really silly, But the reason that we do that is because then your subconscious will associate all of the other things on the board with this part that you've already manifested. And so it assumes that it's all part of your current reality. Your subconscious doesn't know when you're making stuff up, right? So we're basically retraining the brain. So then I would ask you, who is the version of you who already has this desire? Who is that version? And then be them. If you want to be fit, you can't focus on dieting and weight. Study fit people. How do fit people live? What do fit people eat? And then do those things. But that's so counterintuitive, right? Because we've been taught that we're supposed to identify the egregious gap and try to repair it. But by doing that, we're basically just reaffirming the gap over and over again. So Jack Canfield, my my mentor, Jack Canfield, he said once a year he does what he calls a come as you'll be party. Doesn't that sound like fun? So he said everybody, and they'll have like a name tag on this, and maybe they're an author or they're a pilot or they're a professional speaker or whatever. So they've got their name on their tag and then whoever they're going to be, whatever that is. And maybe it's just going to be happy, right? So, and then they come to this party, and throughout the entire time at the party, they speak to everybody at the party as an author or as a pilot, and the things that they get excited about or the book that they're working on or whatever. And the whole party is just this series of acting as if. It's like pretending to be that version of you. It's incredibly powerful. In fact, I totally need to do that in 2024. So if you guys want to come to my party, it's going to be really fun. And then number 6, finally, follow your intuition and act on that inspiration. And I'm not talking about the hustle, right? Of course you have to take action, but forget the busy work. I'm talking about divine guidance. You very often have to slow down to speed up. But as you begin to focus on what you, more on what you want, and actively begin to embody this version of you, what's going to happen is the stars are going to align. The right people are going to show up. Opportunities are going to pop up out of nowhere. And sometimes they're really subtle and we can miss them. It's like a whisper. Your ego screams instructions because it's scared and it's trying to protect you. But intuition is just going to kind of tap you on the shoulder. So follow unexplainable urges. Take a different route. Call the person who's been on your mind over the course of the last couple of weeks. Write down your dreams. See if you can identify trends there. Take the class that you've been wanting to take. Listen to that podcast that somebody sent you. Trust your gut. And as you make decisions, stop before you make the decision and ask, how does this feel in your body? If this is a yes, if I say yes to this, visualize yourself in that scenario and say, how does my body feel? Am I getting a knot in my stomach? Is my throat starting to close? Do I feel expansive in this decision? Your body is such a barometer for decisions, and we've learned to look for outside information, including other people's opinions, highly dangerous, about what we should be doing. So in 2024, I want you to check where there might be contradictions in your life that are blocking you from getting where you want to be. Mostly happiness comes from what you add to, it doesn't come from what you add to your life. It comes from what you are willing to leave back in 2023. So you lighten your load by releasing whatever no longer serves you, the people, the behaviors, the habits, the things. That's the thing that came to me in my meditation yesterday and it wasn't about declutter your life. I'm not a collector of stuff. But what it said was, the message that came to me was, free yourself of anything in your home that is not depictive of, is that a word? That does not depict, thank you. That does not depict, I didn't say my guides had good grammar. I don't know. So that is basically doesn't resonate with the version of you that you want to be. And whatever that looks like. I've got some great books here, but they're like old corporate books. I don't want to do the corporate work anymore. Why do I have these books? Right? Clothes that I think might come back in style. If they come back in style, I will have the resources to buy them again. Right? So just letting go of things that no longer represent who I say I am. So I want you to think of your vision board, if you have one, as a decision board. I'm going to say that again. Think of your vision board as a decision board. It's no longer a reminder of what you want that you don't have. I invite you to make a conscious decision to have every experience that feeds your soul in this lifetime. Consider that everything in your life right now is like an algorithm for all of your past thinking. Remember, that's what the RAS does. If you look at social media, it feeds you advertisements or information or things, because you know this happens, right? You hear yourself talking about something, or you look something up on your phone, and the next thing you know, all of your social media is showing you ads for that thing that you were just talking about, right? Because it's going, oh, he wants to know more about this. Oh, she's interested in that. So it just keeps feeding you the same garbage over and over again. So that's what your reticular activating system does. It figures out what you say you want, which is really what you don't want, but what you think about all the time. And it keeps feeding you that information because it thinks that's what you want. So to really stop and say, okay, if this is the algorithm of my past thinking, I give myself some grace for that, but it's just a data point. You were not meant to struggle through this human experience. And the good news is, not just in 2024, but every single day of your life, you can think a new thought anytime you want. Thank you so much for letting me hang out with you guys this morning. I love you. Good to see you and listening to my snarky nose. So shall we move into meditation? I don't know if you have any music for this, Kyle, or you just want me to talk. We good? Okay. So I would invite you then, as you feel comfortable, if you want to close your camera, you can. Nobody's going to be looking at you though. So just close your eyes as you feel comfortable and just rest your hands into your lap. Let your chair hold the weight of your body. Big deep breath through the nose to the count of 4. 2, 3, and 4. And release to the count of 4. 2, 3, and 4. One more big deep breath. Slowly. And this time as you release, I want you to feel your shoulders just drop. There's nothing to be concerned about. There's nothing to think about. There is nothing to worry about. The point of power for you is right now. It's in this moment. There is no past. There is no future. There is only right now. It is the thoughts you choose to think in this moment are the only things that matter. Just knowing that your guides, your angels, your higher self, they've all come here to this planet to be here with you in this game we call life. But they will not interfere or manipulate your life in any way. In fact, they won't even provide you with insight until you ask. Create some clarity around what you want. Believe with all your heart that this is possible for you. Because it would not be in your heart, this desire, if it were not yours to make manifest in this lifetime. So for just a moment, I'd like for you to raise your hands up and put them in front of you and just touch the palms of your higher self, whatever visual that looks like for you. See yourself on the other side of this veil, in perfect health, in great joy, in the knowing that this is the game that we're playing and it's fun and it's creative, and you are not alone. As you touch the hands of your higher self, I want you to feel the heat move into the palms of your hands. And feel the warm energy exchange. Because there is no separation between your physical body and your soul. You're one and the same. It's not better than you. It does not judge you. It feels only deep love for you. And take that warmth and place your hands together and feel it just move throughout your body. This is a creative energy of the universal power that is yours every day. Invite your non-physical support system to communicate with you all the time. Allow it to have a special place in your life and in your decision making. Your soul is deeply grateful to be approached with trust to help you navigate your life here. So today we know, right now, we know that there is nothing between you and your desire. That we release all limiting beliefs, and we inventory with a non-judgmental eye all of the contradictions in our lives so that we can eliminate them and open up a pathway for great things to happen for us. It is with this power that we create our 2024. And we are deeply grateful. Amen. Do you want to open your eyes and come back to the room with us? Big deep breath through the nose and out through the mouth. And so it is.